Hey, it's me, Vicky Marie, and thank you so much for being here with me. As always, I want to thank all of my subscribers, anyone who has liked my videos, anyone who shared them or just watched them, even the little spite squad out there, the trolley dollies. Thank you so much for creating interest in my channel. Especially, I want to thank those of you who've gone a little bit of the extra mile and you've become members of my channel. I really enjoy our members' lives that we do on every Thursday. Thank you to those of you who've bought me a coffee, sent me a super, PayPal'd me, emailed me, supported my channel in any way, shape or form. Thank you so much. Okay, so what am I going to talk about today in this video? Well, I found another podcast from a bit more back in the day, after Nicola, poor Nicola, had been found, unfortunately deceased. But back in February, The Guardian did this podcast. Now, I'd be very surprised if any of you have listened to it before. Maybe you have, maybe you haven't. Let me know in comments. But it's interesting because this podcast, well, the title of this podcast is, when I can find it, where's it disappeared to? But I had it right there. A little bit further up, a little bit further up. Sorry. So, yeah, the title of this podcast is Why Did the Search for Nicola Bulley Turn So Toxic? So, I thought this would be interesting to listen to. So, let's see. Now, I'm going to just read out the description to you before we actually, the episode description. After the mortgage advisor, Nicola Bulley, disappeared, TikTok detectives, grief tourists, and the media descended. Now her family, again, it's this family, who is the family? But anyway, now her family have hit out at the appalling way they have been treated. I, honest to God, I'm a bit, how did people treat them appallingly? I've never treated Nicola's family appallingly. Anyway, what went wrong? Help support our independent journalism at theguardian.com in focus. Now, what always intrigues me about this, you'll hear as it goes, all the things that they're criticising social media for doing, they do. But it seems to be okay for them to do it. It's okay for them to go to the river and see the scene and take videos at the scene and interview people and discuss the case, etc. That's okay. They're allowed to do that. But no, social media aren't allowed to do that. They hyped everybody up to be sort of obsessed with this case. And then they turned around and said, oh, no, the same with the family, to be honest, and friends making videos appealing to, on the TV every 30 seconds, practically. Somebody weren't they, Emma? All those interviews. Asking Peter Falding to help and him volunteering his services, and then turning round and scathing attack, didn't they, at the press conference after poor Nicola was found, and that very, very strange, in my eyes, police statement that Pauline Stables read out, or family statement that they got Pauline Stables to read out. So, what do you think? Do you think it's going to be interesting to hear what the Guardian and they interviewed two local journalists, if you like. I think they work for the Guardian, but they're like the local reporters. So let's have a listen. Okay, so you should be able to see that now. Let's play.
This is The Guardian.
Today, why did one woman's disappearance become a social media feeding frenzy?
So notice it says social media feeding frenzy. It was a mainstream media feeding frenzy as well, thank you.
I'm in the village of St Michael's on Wyre in Lancashire, sort of halfway between Preston and Blackpool. I'm at the bench where Nicola Bulley was last seen just over 3 weeks ago.
See, this is what I mean. He's gone there to the bench. They've gone there to the bench to make a podcast about why people shouldn't have gone there to the bench. Crazy.
There are yellow ribbons tied to it. There's a handful of dog walkers have wandered past over the past couple of hours. Nicola was a familiar face on this dog walking route. She was a member of the local community and she's gone.
My colleague Josh Halliday is one of many reporters who spent time in St Michael's since Nicola Bulley was reported missing. Nicola was 45 years old. She had a partner called Paul and 2 daughters. After she dropped them off at school one morning recently, she vanished. Police said they thought she'd fallen into the River Wyre, which runs through this small village where she lived and out to the Irish Sea.
It's a cliche that journalists use to describe crime scenes a lot of the time. It's a tight-knit area, but this does feel like a tight-knit area. There's
Well, I think I would go along with that. It's a very tight-knit area. It's a very strange, village. It's not strange. It's typical village.
a tiny school, a pub, a petrol station. There are a number of small businesses, farms, and that's about it.
Nicola's disappearance seemed so mysterious. And as the police made details public, the conspiracy theories started, because some people didn't trust what the police were telling them.
In 29 years.
The thing is, people did not trust what the police were telling them because it did not make sense. When things don't make sense, that's when people don't trust. Conspiracy theories, they arise out of the police speculation. All the things that were said right from the beginning, they didn't ring true. Even the family, that later accepted everything in the inquest, they all said they did not believe she was in the river. PA himself said it. Louise said it. Everybody, all the neighbours and the friends were saying it. She cannot be in the river. And then suddenly it comes to the inquest and it was she must have slipped in the river. That's why people didn't believe the police.
Police service, I've never seen anything like it. Some of it's been quite shocking and really hurtful to the family.
And so social media users turned themselves into amateur detectives. They swarmed the village searching for Nicola, taking selfies at the spot where she was last seen and flying drones overhead. Meanwhile, the news channels had the story covered 24/7.
This is a village that has fell under siege for the last 3 weeks. It's a very small place, and something like this will be felt very deeply by them. And I think even more so, the sense that they've been trampled on by outsiders.
They've been trampled on by outsiders. Now, I think at that particular time, in those 3 weeks that Nicola was missing and people were turning up, and They probably were, it must have been irritating. I'm sure it was irritating, and I certainly wouldn't, none of us would want someone turning up at your door and shoving a camera in your face, or, nobody would want that. And I can 100% appreciate that. But I think what we've always got to remember is those people that went there, they went there for, Rebecca just said there, she's not known anything like it in her 29 years of policing. Of course, she's retired now, hasn't she? No, well, that's right, because there's never been a case quite like this, where there was so much mystery and nothing added up. With the combination of the fact that we are in the social media age. But this case, it's not just because of that, because the thing is, there's lots of crimes or possible crimes happen day in, day out, and YouTubers or TikTokers or whatever they're, or mainstream media could turn up there and people wouldn't even be interested in it. There's something about this case. It's the mystery of it. It's the fact that Nicola was just out walking her dog, doing her normal routine, and disappeared. People know that there's more to this case. Whatever anyone tells us, we know that it was not just a case of she just slipped into the river. Nobody saw her, nobody found her for 3 weeks. In fact, the longer it goes on, the more ludicrous it sounds. It's not like the longer it goes on, the more you think, oh, well, we've just got to accept it. The longer it goes on, you just feel it's not possible that it happened in that simplistic way they are saying that it did.
On Monday, the search for Nicola came to an end when Lancashire Police confirmed that a body found in the river was hers.
Our family liaison officers have had to confirm our worst fears today. We will never be able to comprehend what Nikki had gone through in her last moments, and that will never leave us.
Her family has said that the press and members of the public have treated them in an appalling way, and they've made it clear they now want to be allowed to grieve. From The Guardian, I'm Hannah Moore. Today in Focus, why did the search for Nicola Bulley turn toxic? Robin Vinter, you're a North of England correspondent for The Guardian. And alongside Josh Halliday, who we just heard, you've been reporting on Nicola's disappearance. What is it, do you think, about the details of what happened to her that's caused so much interest from the media and from the public?
I think on the surface of it, it seemed such a mystery. A woman who vanished into thin air. She'd dropped her children off at school that morning and then was taking the dog for a walk. Her phone had been left on a bench and it was still logged on to a work Teams call, and the harness of her dog was on the floor and her dog was loose in the field. And the bench is really right next to the River Wyre.
I suppose the way it was presented to people made it feel very relatable.
It actually isn't right next to the River Wyre. There's quite a distance. I was watching an interview again with Charlotte, the neighbour, and she said her actual words were, she can't have fell in the river, or she made some comments to that effect, but then her exact words was, it would be an accomplishment to fall in from that far back. That was Charlotte's exact words. So, they're trying to, that's why people wanted to go to the scene. That's why anyone wants to go to the scene, because they want to see it for themselves. I've been there and I've seen it. You don't fall from the bench. To fall in that river, you literally would have to be stood right on the edge.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's something I heard time and time again, actually. A lot of people drop their children off at school in the morning and then go and walk their dog while they're listening to a work call. There's something incredibly relatable about that.
What kind of information were the police putting out in the first week or so of her disappearance?
Initially, the police asked for dash cam footage from vehicles and anyone who might have been in the area to get in touch with them and report what they might have seen. It was quite clear early on that the police, they thought she'd gone in the river.
And so people in the local community were looking along the riverbank. And then as the days went on, people from outside the area got involved, didn't they?
Yeah, it was probably only after about a week of her being missing that people from outside the area started to arrive in St Michael's.
The community have actually sort of organised their own search. So you go to local tennis club, St Michael's on Wire.
So this is Emma. She was organising all the searches, wasn't she? This was the time when she did 18 interviews with the mainstream media that she then later, the family turned around and said the mainstream media had intruded.
We have maps printed. Anybody wants to come along, join the search, and just do anything we possibly can to bring Nikki home. She's got 2 little girls wanting a mummy, so anybody's got any information, please just come forward. We don't know why she's missing, where she is. We just want her home.
It is a rural area and there would have been a lot of land to cover and a lot of riverbank to cover. So those kind of pairs of eyes are very useful and very needed. But what also happened was people were coming from outside to take pictures of the scene, to sit on the bench and take a selfie and put that on social media, or to make TikTok and YouTube videos.
People been walking past the bench. There's no police tape up. This would normally be sealed off as a crime scene.
There's that gate which goes.
Yeah. So that's why people were coming and sitting on the bench, because there was no police tape up to stop anybody going there. Anytime it's a complete mystery to me why there was no police tape up, and people can say what the hell they like, but I've seen similar things. We've all seen similar things to this where someone's just gone missing, but there's a thought maybe they've found something of theirs, because it's not only just in cases of crime. They don't want the public stumbling across a body, someone hanging from a tree in the woods or whatever, who may have done something to themselves. If they think there's something untoward, whatever way has happened, accidental or foul play or self-inflicted, of course the police would cordon off the area. That, to me, and this is what I'll say forever, that was the mistake that the police made. And after that, everything else was just, everything. There was nothing more to be done after that, really, because they were so fixed in this idea that she'd fallen into the river without taking other scenarios into account, that by the time they did suddenly think, when they suddenly put all these big guns in there, like Pauline Stables and Rebecca Smith, who normally deal with murders, Pauline Stables is now dealing with the Charlene Downs murder inquiry. So, hello? So they should have been cordoned off. And that was Peter Falding, of course, saying himself, he's got a lot of experience, saying himself that it should have been cordoned off.
To the caravan site, there's the bench. Nobody's even mentioned about that gate.
And it did get to the point where they had become quite a nuisance, I think, to the police. Some of them were going and confronting people.
It doesn't say that it's private property. There's no sign saying that.
There's a sign at the bottom of the slope down there as you come up to the river.
We didn't see any sign.
The gate's locked. That gate's locked.
They were going around abandoned buildings. There were certain kind of hotspots that, attracted a lot of conspiracy theories. So there's a caravan park very nearby. And a lot of people on social media were speculating that somebody in the caravan park had taken her. And of course, police had searched the caravan park and they'd searched all the caravans.
We've only a 10-minute window in which we cannot account for Nicola's movements.
So there you go. There's Sally Riley, 10-minute window. This 10-minute window Do you know how long 10 minutes is? If I just sat here now and didn't say anything for 10 minutes, it's quite a long time. There's a lot of things can happen in 10 minutes. If I even sat here and didn't say anything for 2 minutes, it would be uncomfortable.
The inquiry team has undertaken a number, as I said, of dash cam, CCTV and ring doorbell footages. This has allowed us to eliminate any trace so far of Nicola having left the riverside, which is really important.
But, you know, that wasn't enough for a lot of people on social media. So the police had to put in place a dispersal order.
That wasn't enough for people on social media because there was no record of her actually entering the area either.
So that they could get rid of nuisance influencers.
So you had some people coming in from outside who were there with the aim of trying to help find Nicola, and you had others who were engaging in what you might call grief tourism. Some of them had come from really far away. Some people had come from America. You know, what appeals to people about doing that?
There's kind of a scale with these kind of things. There were people who lived locally who were just a bit suspicious of whether the police were doing a good job with the case. So I spoke to quite a few different people, and there was kind of a few common themes.
Well, the thing is, I know from the emails I've had from locals, the locals were worried that a woman had disappeared from their doorstep. You know, I'd be worried if someone disappeared from my little village walking their dog, and then you'd be thinking, well, is it safe to walk our dogs? That's why the villagers were worried.
So almost all of them didn't trust the police's official account of what they believed happened and the evidence that was there.
Yeah, they didn't believe it because they knew it couldn't be true, especially the villagers. The villagers who walked around that river every day, along that river every day. You know, this girl, you'll find as she's talking, she's really irritating because she's one of those prissy sort of, I know it all. I know it all, and this is the reason. But she doesn't look at, you know, of course the villagers were worried because they knew it. Nobody had ever fallen in there before. Let's get a grip on this. This is not a river that people just fall in and die. No, it never happened to anyone before. There was a toddler 20 odd years ago who was found drowned in the river. That, you know, I doubt very much that was ever investigated properly. But it's a toddler, a 2-year-old, and it wasn't at that spot. You know, it was somewhere else up the river. And there was a lad who had come off his motorbike and gone into the river. But again, it was nothing like this. There had been nobody has ever fallen accidentally into that river at that spot. And even now, when supposedly somebody did, there is nothing up there to protect other people from doing it as well, because it doesn't happen.
There are a lot of videos and photos being shared in Facebook groups that were fake. So I spoke to the guy who set up one of the Facebook groups, and he was saying he'd had to get 15 volunteer moderators in to be deleting videos. And then there was kind of a subset of people who were almost creating fake content.
Now, I think anybody who did that created fake content or made up photos, or, you know, it's disgusting. It is disgusting. You know, I'm sure that did happen. So I have no defense for those people.
To share in these groups.
To see some of the vile speculation online, some of the theories that are incredibly, incredibly hurtful. I don't think people are realising that the family are sitting at home and able to act.
So that is Heather, I think, speaking.
Access and see all of that.
In one of the Facebook groups, someone had shared a video from TikTok where someone had supposed that there was a tunnel underneath the river between these two buildings that someone could have kidnapped her and dragged her through a tunnel underneath the river. And the tunnel doesn't exist. It was just completely made up, I think, in very poor faith.
Did people have theories about who might be responsible for
No, I don't know anything about that or that tunnel or anything. And if somebody did make that up, it is disgusting.
her disappearance?
What came up time and time again was that the family was somehow involved, especially her partner. So her partner, Paul Ansell, had done a few interviews quite early on, as any worried relative is in front of the camera. He'd been a bit uncomfortable in some ways.
I mean, she's so defensive of him. Does she know him?
I just can't believe that we're a week on, and as yet, it seems like we're no further on. It just seems.
It wasn't about him feeling uncomfortable. He laughed, he smiled. That's what it was. And it could have been a nervous smile. But that's what started most people off, suspecting that maybe Paul had something to do with it, wasn't it? When he smiled.
It just seemed absolutely impossible. Just like a dream. Just cannot get my head around any of it.
And there were TikTok and YouTube so-called body language experts, which is just a pseudoscience. I saw this one video where a body language expert had said that shows that he's hiding something. And it was just rubbish. It was absolute rubbish.
Absolute rubbish. Well, I'm not sure who that she's alluding to there. A lot of people did examine his body language. But how does she know it's rubbish? How does she know it's rubbish?
There were a lot of people as well looking at the family's financial records and going through family members' Facebook pages, thinking that they could be the person to find this crucial bit of evidence. Somebody contacted me saying, I've looked at pictures of the scene. She could have sunk into the mud. A psychic in Germany sent me some coordinates of where he believed she was. I've covered a few missing.
There are definitely a few nutters out there, I know from some of the emails I've had, but I think what you've never got to lose sight of is whatever, she's making a judgment on who she thinks is reasonable or not. But I think, to me, I just think anyone who sends me any information is because they feel that something happened or there's something that's not been explained, and they do it for the best possible reasons. They do it because for whatever reason, they have started to identify with Nicola in some way, invest in what happened to them. At the end of the day, what it is people feel that there's something wrong, and everybody would like to be the person to find out what really happened. If it didn't happen the way nobody was happy. Well, the inquest hadn't even been when this podcast was released, but nothing has ever. I think we're all waiting really for something. It's not that we don't want to believe it. It's just that we've not been presented with anything yet that has made us believe it. That's what I think.
Person's cases before, and I've never had anything like this. And the police have said exactly the same thing as well.
Do you think the police were prepared for all these influencers and members of the public trying to turn detective, as if this was a true crime case?
Not at all, no. And I think with missing persons cases, there are thousands of them every year, and most of them only ever get as far as the local newspaper, if at all they even make it into the press. And I think the police had probably been thinking along those lines.
I remember when I first heard the news bulletin about it, I was like, wow, they're giving a lot of attention to this case very early on.
The kind of lack of information that the police provided quite early on, that it left the door open to.
Yeah, the problem came from that right at the beginning when, well, they gave conflicting information, didn't they? They messed up the timeline where the dog was found. 1 minute she was found earlier on, then it was an hour later. Then there was the phone being left there and the harness being left there on the bank. people, and apart from anything else, it stinks. It's like everybody knows it doesn't feel right. And the public, I think people think the public is stupid. And in some things we can be stupid, I suppose. But we always have a reason. We could not see a reason. We could not see the rationale between this presumption. And it just felt wrong. I mean, to me, that's where it was when I first started watching it. It was, I can remember just thinking, oh, well, first of all, I thought, oh my God, that's not very good. She's probably been abducted, and they said she'd disappeared. And I thought they would find her probably DEAD, at the hands of some nutcase. But then when they said she'd fallen in the river, I don't know, just straight away, it just seemed ridiculous to me. Anyway, there you go.
Concerns that she might have been taken or something might have happened to her that wasn't as straightforward as she'd gone in the river. And I think once that narrative had kind of been set that anything could have happened to her, the police had so much trouble getting it all under control at that point.
And while this whole circus was going on with influence,
the police managed it terribly. I think that is just the way it is. They did manage it. So should have cordoned off the area. They probably shouldn't have given any press conferences or very little information in the beginning, because you can't until you sort of get more of a handle on what's happened.
There's reporting conspiracy theories. Nicola's family were raising concerns with the way that the police were handling the case. Her sister, Louise Cunningham, put out this post on Facebook saying that there was no evidence whatsoever that Nicola had fallen into the river.
And we've just got to keep such an open mind with everything, because we just have no idea where she is. It's like she's just vanished into thin air.
How do you think that played into the doubts in the public's mind?
It's really tricky with these kind of cases because
because don't forget, that was Louise saying that. Paul said exactly the same thing, and Emma said exactly the same thing. So come on then, how are you going to explain?
Family members never want to believe that their loved one is dead. And it's it's human. It's completely understandable that you cling to any kind of hope offered by anybody, even where it's quite implausible. I think that's something that maybe the public don't understand very much as well, that if the family are clinging to hope that their loved one could be alive and exploring theories that maybe aren't that plausible, it doesn't necessarily mean.
God, she's so condescending, this girl. So that's what the public probably thinks. She knows exactly what's happened. She knows everything, but the public, they don't know anything.
That there was something wrong with the police investigation.
And the public's trust in the police has been severely damaged in the past few years, hasn't it? For example, by the case of Wayne Couzens, a serving officer who murdered Sarah Everard, by the way that officers mishandled the deaths of Bieber Henry and Nicole Smallman, the fact that the Met has set up an entire unit to investigate its own officers over sexual offences. How do you think that overall mistrust of the police that's in the air at the moment played into the public's perception of how Lancashire police?
Yeah, I think the interviewer is quite astute, and I think that's true. I think, there is a general air of distrust about the police that perhaps wasn't there before the Sarah Everard case and various other cases. So that's probably has had an impact on it. But I think that the main thing is they didn't deal with it very well. They would have dealt with it better.
Police were dealing with this.
Yeah, I think it was probably quite significant. That public mistrust of the police when it comes to cases involving women really does go back decades. If you look at cases like the Yorkshire Ripper, Peter Sutcliffe, women died because the police didn't investigate that case properly. That's been in people's minds for decades. And I think the conversation recently about cases involving women that the police have been shown to have either made mistakes or covered up wrongdoing, the police really underestimated how much mistrust there was.
The police weren't doing interviews, but you did have a few sort of experts coming out and giving their theories. There was this diving expert doing loads of interviews on TV and in the newspapers. Can you tell me about him?
He's called Peter Folding. He owns a company, and one of the things that the company does is forensic underwater search.
So this will be interesting to see what she thinks of him.
This equipment, which they believe is amongst the best in the country, and what it will allow them to do is to put this sonar, what it's called, into the water, and it will...
He arrived not long after Nicola had gone missing, after saying he would be able to find her if he was able to search the river. From what I can tell, he contacted the family and offered his services for free. So he wasn't invited by police, and he certainly wasn't leading the search, which is what was reported quite a bit. For me,
well, what we know now is he did not contact the family. The family, Paul or Emma or whoever you call the family, contacted him and asked him to help, and he volunteered his services. Emma said that herself in an interview. She said herself that they contacted him.
There were some alarm bells ringing at that point, because it is very, very unusual for anyone involved in the case to speak to the media at all. But what happened over the days after that was he became almost the voice of the case.
I personally...
Oh my God, she's just really putting the knife in.
Don't think she's in the river. That's just my gut instinct at this point. I may be proved wrong later on, but the police have done a fantastic search already with their existing resources, plus their sonar. Now we've got our sonar. We're searching where the bench is tomorrow up the river.
And one of his theories was that she'd run off with a lover, which just made absolutely no sense. You know,
What? Did he say that, Peter Folding? One of his theories was that she had run off with a lover.
First of all, the police were quite sure that she hadn't left the field on foot. And of course, police had her phone, and they had spoken to all of her family and friends, and there was absolutely no indication whatsoever that she had a lover that she had run off with. And yet he was saying that to the press, and certain newspapers were using that as if it was a legitimate theory. And that is kind of the problem, really, when the police don't have much to say. And I sympathise a bit with the police in this case, because when you've got a missing person and you're fairly sure that they're in the river, and you're doing your best to search and you're doing your best to find them, but actually you're not finding them, you know, there isn't very much to say every day.
So the police then found themselves in this position of needing to respond to that hunger for more information. So almost 3 weeks after Nicola went missing, on February the 15th, Lancashire Police held a press conference.
Thank you, everyone. Can you hear me okay here?
And it was then that they revealed that Nicola had some vulnerabilities that were of particular concern to them.
As soon as she was reported missing, following the information that was provided to the police by her partner Paul, and based on a number of specific vulnerabilities that we were made aware of, Nicola was graded as high risk. That is normal.
Why did the police say that they were holding that press conference? What was the justification for it?
I think the speculation had got really out of hand, and the police felt like they really had to justify why their main hypothesis was that she fell in the river by explaining that she had some
Something I just want to add here before. I don't think, I've only listened to this once before, so I could be wrong. I might have missed it. We'll see. But this little jumped up little girl, she says, or she never mentions, I should say, the welfare check on the 10th of January. She never mentions it at all, as far as I can remember.
vulnerabilities. I think they had hoped that would be enough. They took questions at the end, and it was something that was asked over and over again. What are these vulnerabilities? And you could see that, you know, they were squirming a little bit, because They were so worried about giving out too much information. And then it was a couple of hours after that press conference that a statement came through by email from the police that said that she'd suffered from issues with alcohol brought on by struggling with the menopause. And I think it was probably a cat can.
I think that again, then that was so. In this case, there's been stages, haven't there, like pivotal moments that have made us feel a certain way. There was Paul smiling at the side of the river, and there was all those interviews by Emma that started people thinking, why is she keep doing interviews? You know, there was Peter Falding. So there were certain pivotal moments, and another one was this, wasn't it, with the you know, all up to this point, they'd said, you know, she was like, well, Paul had said she was the rock of the family. Everybody relied on her, etc. You know, there was no mention of her having any vulnerabilities. And then suddenly it was, oh, not only she's got vulnerabilities, you know, she's a menopausal alcoholic wreck. Basically, that's how it sounded. It went from one extreme to another. It went from her being the rock of the family and, you know, is perfect. I mean, at the end of the day, nobody's a perfect person, but we do tend to talk like that about people who are either missing or DEAD, because nobody likes to speak ill of those people. And then suddenly all this came out, and it was like, what? You know, and even Peter Falding had not known that before.
Way of trying to mediate the line about her suffering from alcoholism. They were worried about her not being sympathetic, but it just backfired horribly.
The Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, is understood to have raised concerns with Lancashire Police after they made public personal information about them.
And it was seen as releasing.
Probably the only good thing that Cruella Braverman has done in her whole pathetic life, to actually, she did stand up and say that the police, you know, well, she expressed concern. Nothing's ever come of it, but she expressed concern that Nicola's private medical records should be exposed in that way. But, you know, who led to that? PA led to that.
Personal information about somebody who could still be alive.
Exactly. It had a huge backlash, didn't it? I mean, even right up to the Prime Minister.
Yeah, because they didn't. My anger. In fact, I was incandescent because my thing was, if you had, let's presume, supposedly Nicola was still alive for us all intents and purposes. So supposing you had just run off because everything had got too much, and maybe you were considering self-deleting. Soon as you saw all your bloody medical records all over the TV, you know, and people saying you were a menopausal alcoholic. Well, if you hadn't done it by then, that would tip you over the edge. That just made me so angry. So here's a woman who's vulnerable, and what do? Tell the whole world about her vulnerabilities. And who was behind that? PA.
Criticised their release of that information. Have Lancashire Police conceded that they should have handled that element of the case differently?
No, they're holding an internal review into the way that the case was conducted and the way that the communications were put out. Since that blew up, they're
having they've had that that's the original internal review, which was, what was it? Lessons learned, move on, no case to answer, load of bollocks. So they've got this. Now we've got the other one that we're still waiting for. So this inquiry from the College of Police, you know what? I can't remember what it is. It's gone on so long. We are now in November. How long does it take to make an inquiry like this? You know what? It only happened in St. Michael's. It didn't happen over in Abu Dhabi or somewhere that they've got to say, you know, it's the most ridiculous, gaslighting, horrible, typical snowman-esque way of just pushing the ball down the line and hoping that by the time it gets to the end, nobody will be interested anymore.
Been a lot more reserved in dealing with the media. So during the search, a body was found and they held a press conference.
Sadly, we are now able to confirm that yesterday we recovered Nicola Bulley from the River Wyre.
And previously they'd held it inside the police headquarters. This one was held outside with no questions from the media. They read 2 statements and there was a real...
Yeah, it was strange, wasn't it? So the other press conferences, they've been inside. It's rare that you see a press conference that's outside. I'm thinking about ones that I've seen from other countries as well. They're normally inside, especially when it's something important. They took no questions whatsoever. And then Pauline Stables was there with this prepared statement from the family, which was scathing. I mean, it literally made me gasp when I heard it.
Real sense that actually something had broken between the media and the police. I think the police felt like the press, wasn't on their side and wasn't being fair.
On Monday, after the police confirmed that the body found in the river was Nicola's, her family released a statement.
Our girls will get the support they need from the people who love them the most. And it saddens us to think that one day we will have to explain to them that the press and members of the public accuse their dad of wrongdoing.
So it's quite a funny thing, isn't it? Because who do you think wrote this? Now, if it was the mum and dad, Ernie and Dot and Louise and, everybody jointly, why, how can I put it? They've never put on a united front. We've never seen Paul and Ernie and Dot and Louise all together talking, giving us a statement. Quite often what happens is in similar cases, it is the police person maybe that gives a statement because probably the family don't feel up to it, which is fair enough after they've just found out that their worst fears have been confirmed. But they normally, stand in the background or put on a united front. Why didn't the parents say, look, I'm trying to say this in a way that people would have listened more. I think if you saw Ernie and Dot there saying, look, please, just leave us alone, I think people would just have to. But I think we've been left with this feeling as well, who do you mean by the family? And why should we leave it alone when we don't think that it happened the way that PA said it did happen? I don't know what happened, but I know that it just all feels wrong. Just been dealt with differently to other cases.
Misquoted and vilified friends and family. This is absolutely appalling.
In it, they criticised the press for misrepresenting members of the family and for contacting them after they'd asked for privacy. Can you explain why Nicola's family are so angry, it seems, at the way her disappearance has been reported?
In a lot of these kind of missing person cases, the police will advise the family not to speak to the media. In this case, what had happened was some news organisations had contacted the family regardless of what the police had advised. And the family...
No. They hadn't contacted the family regardless of what the police advised. The family had always been in touch with them regardless of what the police advised. Because I don't know if you remember, but when Paul did that interview on Channel 5, the police refused, they declined the invitation to speak. They probably said to Paul, look, you shouldn't really go ahead with this. He did it. He wanted to do it. Emma did her 18 video interviews voluntarily. Nobody made her do it. Even Louise and Ernie and Dot, their interview was voluntarily. And she does go on to say, and I think she's right, so the journalists built up a relationship with these family members, but it wasn't a forced relationship. the family members wanted this attention.
We were open to speaking to them, and the family did some interviews. For these media organisations, it probably felt like they built up a bit of a rapport with the family. You know, they were able to text Paul, Nicola's partner, and he would respond. And I think then when Nicola's body was identified,
He did more than respond. He sent a voice note one night with a great big rambling voice note that he was obviously reading off a script.
The police had put out a line that asked the media to respect the family's privacy. Those organisations had felt like they had built up a relationship with the family, probably felt like that didn't apply to them, and the family felt different.
We tried last night to take in what we had been told in the day, only to have Sky News and ITV making contact with us directly when we expressly asked for privacy.
Nicola's family.
Now, the other thing is, Paul did respond. He replied to the text that Sky News sent him. He replied saying, oh, you know, it's just agony, blah, 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 blah. And then this reply was reported on all the mainstream media platforms. So why did he reply? Why did he reply? Why did he just not send a message back and say, look, we've asked you for privacy, fuck off? He didn't do that. He replied. He's obviously thought about it afterwards.
Family specifically criticised the way Sky News and ITV had dealt with them. And Ofcom, the media regulator, has put out a statement since saying it's extremely concerned and that it's written to the bosses of those channels asking them to explain their actions. What do you think the mainstream media should learn from the way that we've reported on Nicola's disappearance?
I think we've got a lot to learn in terms of whether we decide that we're going to chase social media or whether we decide that we're going to report things in a lot of cases where someone's speculating on something. At The Guardian, we're very careful about researching, you know, who they are, what their expertise is, what their background is, what their connection to the case is.
It really is a delicate balancing act, reporting on people who are going through grief. 1 minute, they may feel able to and want to talk to the media, and the next minute, they absolutely do not feel able to. I'd imagine there have been difficult moments along the way for you as a reporter, knowing how to weigh that up.
I've had a couple of situations before, historically, where I've gone to interview somebody and they didn't look okay, and the kind of things that they said, I thought that they would really regret and that they'd feel very upset about later. And I've said, let's pick this up later on when you've had a bit of time to grieve and a bit of time to think about it. I think the important thing was to make sure we were keeping up with reporting on it, because there's so much misinformation out there that actually, you know, there needs to be somewhere where people can go to understand what's really happening.
God.
Coming up, how can the police improve their communication in an age of social media conspiracy theories?
So what's a conspiracy theory when it doesn't fit the police narrative, doesn't it? Oh, it's a conspiracy theory. I suppose...
Robin, the commanding officers of every police force across the country...
Suppose with Jimmy Savile, it was a conspiracy theory. Oh, until they realised that that was true.
Are going to be looking at this case and thinking, what can we learn from it? What do you think the police should take from the way that Lancashire police have handled this in terms of how to communicate with the media and how to communicate with the public when somebody goes missing?
Yeah, what they have to do is take control, not lie. I've seen them do it over in America with these cases that I've been following over there. Give as much information as you can. The information you can't give, you say, I'm sorry, I cannot divulge that information at the moment. I'm sure you'll understand it's a case that's been investigated. That's what they say, and people just accept that. They don't go, oh, what do you mean? Fucking tell us. You know, people understand. I think it's part of this dumbing down of the public. You know, I've been talking about it for a while now, for probably the last 20 years. The British public has been gradually dumbed down by your press is like for children practically. The programs on the TV are all celebrity shite, nothing to make you think. The probably most intellectual program you get on the telly is The Chase or something, you know. So it's the dumbing down of British society, and that's why those of you, which are a lot of you, that are not dumb, you're looking elsewhere because you know it. You're watching the TV and you're thinking, what a load of rubbish. So you're looking at social media, you're looking at different facets of social media and making your own mind up. That's what we used to do. Look at all the different opinions and you decide what you think. Don't just, you know, like a sheep follow somebody else.
Yeah, I think there are some enormous challenges for the police. I think one thing that they might be looking at now is historically, journalists and the police maybe had a bit of an adversarial relationship sometimes, but actually it was a much closer relationship. Even just 10 years ago, if you worked on a local paper, you would every morning call the local CID to find out what, you know, what they were working on.
I remember doing that, yeah.
But we don't do that anymore. Everything goes through the press office. Some police forces are still quite good at it. And I'm hoping there might be a bit more of a return to that because I think it's helpful for everybody. I think the second thing is as well, I don't know what the police are going to do about social media. It's something that really we haven't ever dealt with before. As the media, we can make agreements with the police to say, okay, well, we will not approach the family, but it doesn't stop TikTokers, you know, peering through people's windows, and it doesn't stop YouTubers flying drones over people's houses, and it doesn't stop.
No, that's true. It is much more fragmented, social media. So, you know, there might be, if you had like 100 YouTubers, there might be 95 of them who would stick to being, you know, would not go around someone's house and knock on the door or blah, 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 blah. But then you always get the other 5% who will. And so fragmented social media, it is difficult. I'm not saying it's not difficult, but one way it would have been easier is if from day one they would have put a cordon up around there, and until, you know, Nicola had been found, nobody should have been allowed to just trample all over that bench and everywhere. That doesn't seem like rocket science to me. Or is it because, another thing I thought, because it's such a little village where not much apparently happens, is it because they just weren't expecting it to be anything? Or was it just, you know, total incompetence? And, you know, and then it was difficult to sort of get back on track after that, wasn't it?
Facebook groups speculating and people making fake videos and sharing them online. In this case, I think certainly isn't the last time that we're going to have seen this.
Well, what are the bosses of those social media platforms saying in response, if anything, to this?
I also think it's lack of resources, because the last couple of cases I've looked at over in the USA, you know, where Danilo Cavalcanti was on the run, or with the Rachel Marin case, or any case where, what was the other one? There was somebody else who was on the run, the serial shooter in Maine. The police they've got enough police. They've cordoned off the area, so they don't get those problems because they make the cordon far enough away that nobody's, you know, going to be a danger to their investigation. But they have more police. We don't have the resources. We don't have the resources. That's basically it in a nutshell. I think we don't have enough police.
So TikTok have put out a statement saying they're taking action against violations of their community guidelines. And in the case of Nicola Bulley, that their thoughts were with the friends and family. But TikTok is hugely pushing these live videos, live streaming, and it's very, very rewarding for people to do those videos. There are things that you will see on social media that, as the media, we would never ever put out. So, for example, the day that the body was pulled from the river, somebody had made a video of that, put it online, and thousands of people had seen it. Social media platforms need.
Again, why was anybody even allowed anywhere near there? Because they weren't prepared.
To take a much more strident stance.
The journalists, the TikTokers, the members of the public will all be leaving St Michael's on Wire now. And what has been a very public story will kind of become smaller and more personal. There'll be a post-mortem and there'll be an inquest that will determine how Nicola died. Do you think that that'll quell the conspiracy theories and allow her family and her friends to grieve?
I think that's the worrying thing about social media and about the nature of conspiracy theories, that actually there's really no guarantee that this will go away. And there's no guarantee that the speculation over the family will go away. Police, right at the very start, ruled out Paul Ansell, Nicola's partner, as having any involvement in the case. But yet there was a swathe of people on social media that are just not willing to accept, the truth, essentially. Conspiracy theories are.
No, but again, they never really explained why. So, we still don't know. Why did they decide it could not be anything to do with Paul? We've still not seen the full CCTV. These are the things that people doubt about, is the patches in explanation. And they may turn around and say it's nothing to do with the public. Well, then the public's going to speculate then. You don't want to give them the full story, then don't be surprised when they speculate.
Big problem.
And in that, people forget that there was a person at the centre of this, and there's a...
Nobody forgets there was a person at the centre of this. Everybody who contacts me about the Nicola Bulley case, unless they're a troller, they don't seem to give a shit about Nicola. They just want to be nasty. But anybody who contacts me with any information or, any worries about, it's because they care about Nicola. It's not because they don't think there's a person in the centre. They know there's a person in the centre, and they've become invested in that person.
Family and friends who are grieving for her.
Yeah, that's right. And also a whole community, really, where people will not be the same as they were before this happened.
No,
there will be a time
too
before
scared.
Nicola Bulley went missing, and at a time since. And I think there's quite a naivety amongst some people about truly how horrific it is for something like this to happen to you, and about the kind of lasting impact and people whose lives will just never be the same.
Robin, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's that podcast, one that I found. I've been looking around for, hope you find them interesting. If nothing else, we're still waiting for this report to come through. So after that, we have to decide what, I have to decide what I'm going to do as far as this case is concerned, depending on what they say. But I have found it interesting to find these podcasts from back in the day, if you like. Some of them from when you'll see them on my channel. There's plenty of videos on my channel with different podcasts that I've found. It's interesting to listen to them now with what we know now and what was being said then. Anyway, at the end of the day, Nicola is no longer with us. So rest in peace, Nicola. And I always send in my love and prayers to her girls and to her mum and dad and anybody else who deserves them. Okay, so remember to live and love very wisely. I'll see you real soon in the next video as always. And until then, may your God go with you. Thank you so much. Bye.